Minister, General, speakers, distinguished guests, my name is Major Naveed Mohammed, and a very warm welcome to the National Muslim Service of Commemoration 2020. It is sad that we're unable to be together for this important event as we have done in previous years. However, considering the circumstances, I think it was important to continue the momentum of this event in order that we can add to the remembrance services which are now beginning to ramp up in readiness for Remembrance Sunday, which of course is coming up on the 8th of November. A very brief overview of the event tonight. We're going to have a series of speakers, followed by a dedicated pre-recorded wreath-laying ceremony, which was filmed at the World War I Memorial in Woking. Throughout the evening, the chat function is active, so please feel free to chat amongst yourselves. And may I request at the end of the presentation, so once everything's done and dusted, and I end the webinar, there will be an opportunity to participate in a short survey. I would encourage as many people as possible, please, to complete that survey. Most of the answers are tick box, yes, no. However, a couple of the boxes require a little bit of text, but that's really important in terms of allowing us to capture some sentiments from the evening, and more importantly, I guess, help inform us, as in the British Army, about how best we can reach out to communities. As is customary for these events, we will begin with a short recitation from the Holy Quran by Qobul Abdullah Job. This will be in Arabic, however, an English translation will be displayed on your screens. So, Qobul Job, you are good and ready. So, in your own time, please go on.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الرحمن علم القرآن خلق الإنسان علمه البيان الشمس والقمر بحسبان والنجم والشجر يسجدان والسماء رفعها ووضع الميزان ألا تطغوا في الميزان وأقيموا الوزن بالقسط ولا تخسروا الميزان والأرض وضعها للأنام فيها فاكهة والنخل ذات الأكمام والحب ذو العصف والريحان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان خلق الإنسان من صلصال كالفخار وخلق الجان من مارج من نار فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان رب المشرقين ورب المغربين فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان مرج البحرين يلتقيان بينهما برزخ لا يبغيان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان يخرج منهما اللؤلؤ والمرجان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان وله الجوار المنشآت في البحر كالأعلام فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان كل من عليها فان ويبقى وجه ربك ذو الجلال والإكرام فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان صدق الله العظيم.
Many thanks, Court Job, for that important recitation and reflection. And just for everybody's views, knowledge rather, Court Job was one of our soldiers who visited Saudi Arabia about 3 years ago to take part in a Quran recitation competition, and was one of 2 representatives of the British Army who went out there. So thank you very much for that, Court Job. Without delay, may I now introduce the first of our speakers for this evening. Baroness Goldie is the Minister of State for Defence in the House of Lords, where her many responsibilities include engagement with retired senior defence personnel and wider opinion formers and community engagement. Baroness Goldie is also an advocate for and chairs meetings of the Armed Forces Muslim Forum. Baroness, please go ahead and unmute yourself. A very warm welcome, and we now look forward to your opening remarks. Over to you, Minister.
Naveed, thank you very much indeed. Can I say it's a great honour to be speaking at this service of commemoration. And it is sad that we're unable to congregate as we normally would, but I'm immensely moved by your collective determination to carry on virtually and to keep the flame of remembrance burning. This year marks a century since the interring of an unknown soldier in Westminster Abbey, and it's also 100 years since the installation of the cenotaph, a monument to the nameless and the numberless multitude whose sacrifices bought us our freedom. Today we remind ourselves that among them were many Muslim soldiers, sailors and airmen from across our great Commonwealth nations whose efforts were truly Herculean. In the Great War, Indian Jawans, the junior soldiers, helped stop the German advance in the trenches of Ypres in the autumn of 1914. The memorial at Neuve-Chapelle in France has the names of almost 5,000 members of the British Indian Army, whose bodies were never found. And 4 years later, Muslim soldiers, many volunteers, stood side by side with their British comrades in Mesopotamia, winning the closing battles of that vast struggle. And of course, we recently marked the end of the Second World War 75 years ago. And we must not forget the vital contribution of hundreds of thousands of Muslims in Africa, in Burma, Malaya, and Italy. Those who joined that great fellowship of nations in fighting shoulder to shoulder to wrest the world from the grip of fascism. Those who helped to secure victory in Europe and over Japan. And they included men like Ali Haider, who displayed exceptional bravery in the battlefield, charging a machine gun post on the banks of the Senio. And he was awarded the Victoria Cross for his selfless commitment. And his example was matched by the heroism of Nur Inyat Khan, working behind the lines as a member of the Special Operations Executive. She provided vital assistance to the French resistance, and she never betrayed her comrades, even under torture. Bravery that posthumously earned her the George Cross. And there are countless others on the roll call of honour of Commonwealth and British forces. Their names might now be dimmed by history, but their deeds burn bright in the memories of families and communities who still remember them with pride. But it would be a mistake to believe that your vast military contribution stopped after 1945. How could it? Because your commitment to the virtues of discipline, respect, and selflessness is perpetual. Your belief in the values of justice, freedom, and stability is timeless. And your determination to defend your beliefs remains enduring, passed down from one generation to the next. Those virtues, those values, and that determination also go to the heart of what it means to serve in the British Armed Forces. So it is no surprise that Muslim personnel have remained an integral part of our military going above and beyond in the modern era, whether in the Falklands or Bosnia, Afghanistan or Iraq. And today we remember that immense collective endeavour. And today, in the midst of another national crisis, COVID-19, we honour a new generation of Muslim regulars and reservists who are again coming to the fore alongside their comrades. They've shown their mettle in the midst of this pernicious pandemic. They've helped to lift the load off our NHS, whether supporting hospitals, setting up testing centres, or delivering vital equipment. While in parallel, the civilian Muslim community, too, as it always does, has stepped up, producing PPE, bringing meals to the needy, and supporting the elderly. Contributions that are not only saving lives, but enriching them in countless communities. So today, we give the unknown and the unsung their due. And in a more dangerous era of threats, both seen and unseen, the example of our great Muslim personnel, past and present, remains an inspiration to our entire nation. For they have shown us that as long as we have compassion, courage, and commitment, we can build a better world together.
Minister, thank you so much for your thoughtful words, and also for making the time to join us for this virtual event, which is exactly that, due to the ongoing crisis that we face, not only as a country but also as a global community. And with exactly that in mind, I now turn to our next speaker, Major General David Eastman, General Officer Commanding Regional Command and Deputy Commander of the Standing Joint Command, United Kingdom. General David commissioned into the Royal Electrical and Mechanical Engineers in 1989 and has served around the world, and was appointed as General Officer Commanding Regional Command in February this year. However, that change of appointment was short-lived, and almost immediately after his appointment, General David has been deeply involved in directing Defence's response to the ongoing pandemic. And it is my pleasure now to hand over to him for his thoughts. So, sir, if you could unmute yourself and please proceed.
Thank you, Nav, and thank you all for giving me the opportunity to speak to you on this important occasion. It's a real honour to be part of this commemoration service, albeit as a remote participant in these strange times. As Nav has said, I am the General Officer Commanding Regional Command and the Deputy Commander of the Standing Joint Command, United Kingdom. And that's the organisation that's responsible for planning and delivering Defence's contribution to UK homeland resilience. But I'm also responsible for the Army's community engagement activities around the UK, and I look forward to opportunities in the future where we can once again continue to arrange physical activities to improve mutual understanding between the British Army and actually all of British society. I do share the views of the Chief of the Defence Staff that we must become a more diverse organisation. And this is not simply a box-ticking exercise, but a real desire to ensure that we attract the best talent in the country so that we can properly respond to threats, whether they're overseas or here at home. And that has been demonstrated in the last 8 months. So in normal times, the work of the Standing Joint Command is focused on fire and flood response or defusing World War II bombs in support of the civil authorities. However, as we're all painfully aware, these aren't normal times. And because of this, we've been intimately involved in supporting the government's response to the pandemic for the last 8 months or so. To give you a feel for what Defence has been doing, we've been involved in supporting the planning efforts of government departments, from local councils and local resilience fora, right through to ministerial and departmental levels across government. We've been supporting the planning, construction and manning of the Nightingale hospitals, and you may have seen a bit of that on the TV. The procurement and delivery of personal protective equipment, the creation and manning of mobile testing units. Again, you may have seen some of that on TV. And we've been supporting testing in care homes, as well as improving the logistic capacity of our testing laboratories. And actually, in terms of the mobile testing units, I think we've delivered just short of 1 million tests with military. We've provided ambulance drivers and ambulance decontamination services, as well as critical care patient transfer services. And our medical community has been fully embedded in the NHS throughout the response. And these are just some of the many areas of support that we've been involved in across all 4 nations of the UK. And of course, this isn't the first time that we've responded to an outbreak of disease. In 2001, Defence was extensively involved in containing the outbreak of foot and mouth amongst British livestock herds. And in 2014, we responded to a call from Sierra Leone, a fellow Commonwealth country, where there was an outbreak of the lethal Ebola virus disease. And we provided immediate assistance to help stop the disease spreading, as well as appropriate training to local medical staff for future resilience. So these responses highlight the fact that our forces are not one-dimensional. We equip our people with important skills, regardless of their rank, which can be adapted to whatever tasks we might be given. Skills that should also prove useful for when our people return to civilian life, and which have been very much on display through the impressive work of our young men and women over the last 8 months. With the current support that we're providing to the nation, the legacy of the Commonwealth, so well highlighted by Baroness Goldie in her comments, continues. There are currently 500 Muslim officers and soldiers within the regular force alone, with many more serving in the reserves. And they, alongside their colleagues, continue to play a key role in support of the UK and across all of the areas that I've highlighted, all of them demonstrating huge commitment, enthusiasm, and innovation. As examples, we've had Muslim soldiers supporting the delivery of testing to help suppress outbreaks in large cities, Leicester being a prime example, and we've got Birmingham, of course. And in fact, having soldiers who are multilingual and can move among the population demonstrated the effectiveness of such a diverse workforce, and we couldn't have done that job without them. Many of our armed forces are embedded in the medical community, and that includes a significant number of Muslim personnel. And they've been working hard across the NHS, testing in schools and supporting the ambulance services across the country. And we've also had a number of innovation measures that have been put forward by members of our Muslim community. As we're all aware, key dates in the calendar have already been disrupted this year, such as Easter, Vaisakhi, Eid, as well as the Jewish New Year. Unfortunately, the Hindu festival of Diwali, due to take place on the 14th of November, is also likely to be significantly affected. And of course, Christmas is only around 6 weeks away and will no doubt be different this year. This disruption has and will cause sadness amongst British communities, as it will amongst military personnel who would also look forward to celebrating these festivals with their colleagues and families. I'm sure you will all join me in hoping that next year will be different, and I can assure you that the British Armed Forces will be playing a significant role in helping to make that happen. As we enter another lockdown, the Armed Forces are already ramping up our support, as highlighted by the Prime Minister, wherever it is needed, in order to enable the best possible response and support our amazing first responders across the country. As I said, the proud and impressive legacy of the Muslims serving in the armed forces continues to this day, and I'm very grateful for their inspirational and enduring contribution, shoulder to shoulder with their colleagues. Thank you.
Sir, thank you for that very, very important and interesting insight. Clearly, challenging times for all of society, and that of course includes military personnel who have also had to adapt to working differently during the ongoing pandemic. And with measures coming in from tomorrow, even more so, now getting into that well-rehearsed plan that we have of making sure that we're continuously able to deliver whatever it's needed, whatever is needed from us to help all of us, all of those around us. Moving on then, and I do apologize. I can see that the chat function is alight with comments, and unfortunately tonight we haven't got the time or the capability to be a bit more interactive. However, what we do have is really interesting speakers moving on, and our next speaker is Dr. Guy Bowman, who is a historian from the University of Exeter. Dr. Guy has previously worked in theatre and also as a teacher overseas. He has a PhD in history and has recently published his first book, The Indian Contingent, The Forgotten Muslim Soldiers of Dunkirk. Dr. Guy will now give us an insight into the historical contribution of Muslim soldiers for Britain. Dr. Guy, over to you.
Thank you, Naveed. So I'm going to share my screen because I've got some slides to show you. So I'm going to talk to you about the Muslim contribution specifically in the Second World War. And the picture that you see there, I will come back and tell you a little bit more about who that wonderful gentleman is a little bit later. There we go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you an overview of the Muslim contribution in the Second World War. I'm going to talk about Force K6, which are the guys that you see in this photo here, who are the people that I've been studying and researching and writing about. I'm going to say a little bit more about Nur Inayat Khan. We've already heard about her. And I'm going to talk about the 14th Army briefly, and specifically Naik Fazl-Din, who was one of their members who won the Victoria Cross. And I'm going to finish by telling you a little bit about Isabel Harling, who is not a Muslim, but you will see the connection when we get there. So as an overview, the Indian Army in the Second World War was 2.5 million men and 11,500 women of the Women's Army Corps, India. And about 34% of that were Muslim. So that comes out at about 850,000 men from the Muslim community in India. Of course, Punjab was a very important recruiting area for Muslims and indeed for Sikhs as well. And the picture you see there is from a British government publication of the 1930s with some sketches of Punjabi Muslims or Punjabi Muslims who were a core part of the British Indian Army in the Second World War, and indeed prior to that in the First World War. And in the Second World War, the Indian Army and the Muslim members thereof served particularly in East Africa, which was the first campaign where the British Army had any success, had a victory. And then in North Africa with the 8th Army, and then going through into Italy, where they were right until the end of the war, and then also in the East in Malaya and in Burma. But also, the Indian Army was represented in France in 1940, and I'll tell you a bit more about them. And the Muslims in the Indian Army were awarded 4 Victoria Crosses and 6 George Crosses during the Second World War. So Force K6, and the photo there was taken in 1940 outside the Woking Mosque, outside the Shah Jahan Mosque in Woking, which was somewhere they visited regularly. So Force K6 were animal transport companies from the Royal Indian Army Service, 4 of these companies. They arrived in France in December 1939 to join the British Expeditionary Force. And the motto of the British Royal Army Service Corps at that stage was not a horse in the force. They were completely mechanized, motorized, all supplies and transport coming by road or by rail, or a combination of those. But they soon realized that actually in the trench warfare that they were anticipating, they would need animal transport as they had in the Great War. And so they went to the Empire to provide the expertise that was lacking in the British Empire, in the British Army, sorry. And so these 4 companies arrived in France in December 1939. The Germans attacked in May 1940. 2 of the companies were evacuated through Dunkirk itself. 1 company became prisoners of war, and the rest were evacuated via Saint-Nazaire in the west of France. And they then spent 3.5 years in Britain. So they were in Britain until the beginning of 1944, and they were in fact reinforced by 3 more companies. And the main thing they were doing was training with British infantry brigades for Operation Jupiter, which was an operation that never happened. It was a plan for an invasion of northern Norway to protect the Arctic convoys, which were going from the north of Scotland round to the Soviet ports, Archangel and Murmansk. And they wanted to, Churchill had the idea to protect those from the German Air Force by an infantry assault. And that such an assault would need mountain troops and would need animal transport. That was a plan. It never happened, but they were attached to British infantry brigades, training for that for several years. And also they made a lot of good friends, and indeed they fell in love. And there's lots of fascinating stories about the relationships that they made, which I'm really amazed to find and put in the book. I'm going to show you a little bit of film footage. I hope this works okay. This is from the summer of 1940, shortly after they'd come back from France through Dunkirk. This film was shot in Ashbourne, Derbyshire. And I'm going to show you a couple of little bits. The first bit is just, well, the first bit opens with them at prayer, actually. And the voiceover is by Z.A. Bukhari, who then after the war went on to be to found Pakistan Radio. Here we go.
अब जवान अपनी कामयाबी की दुआ मांगने के लिए खुद खुदा के दरबार में हाजिर हुए हैं। कुछ जवान तंबू खड़ा कर रहे हैं। मिस्टर तंबू खड़े हो गए। ये तंबू किस लिए है? अखबार पढ़ने के लिए? जी नहीं। जी हाँ, इक्का। साफे की सफाई, सर की सफाई, बादशाह सलामत और मलिका साहिबा मुआयने के लिए तशरीफ लाना चाहते हैं। ये मेजर मोहम्मद अकबर खान साहब हैं। बादशाह सलामत तशरीफ ले आए। ये रिसालदार मेजर मोहम्मद अशरफ खान साहब हैं। मौलवी साहिबान नजराना पेश कर रहे हैं।
It's a lovely bit of film. I haven't got time to show you all of it. You can find it online. Of course, the King and the Queen there, it's King George VI and Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, as I know her anyway. So just to tell you a bit more about Major Muhammad Akbar Khan, who we saw there in the film, and this is a portrait of him. So he was from Punjab. He fought in the Great War. He was a Jemadar. And then he became one of the very first batch of Indians who were trained to be officers, which was at Indore in 1919. So that process of Indianization, he was one of the very first. He was awarded the MBE 1930, and he served for many years with Probyn's Horse. And then he transferred to the Service Corps, and he was with the 25th Company of Force K6 when they were in France. And then, in fact, he was the only Indian officer on the beach at Dunkirk. So you can picture the scene if you've seen the film, the recent 2017 film, with the Stukas bombing the beach and the long lines of British soldiers lining up to get on board ships, and shells coming in and smoke from the refinery. And through that chaos, there are these 300 Indian soldiers marching along, Muhammad Akbar Khan at their head, as they march along on May the 28th, 1940, to the mole where they will be picked up and taken across the Channel to England. It's an extraordinary story, and it never ceases to fill me with amazement that these guys were there at Dunkirk and that nobody knows about them. So this painting was painted by Henry Lamb. He went back subsequently, Akbar Khan went back to India, and in 1947, at the time of partition, he was the senior officer in Pakistan with a number PA1, and he retired as a Major General. I'm going to move on and tell you a little bit about Noor Inayat Khan, who I'm sure many of you know about. There's that lovely photo of her. She was the daughter of an Indian Sufi. She was descended from Tipu Sultan, was a great enemy of the British Empire. She was born in 1914, and she grew up in London and Paris, and she came back to London in 1940 after the Germans invaded with her brother. She joined the Women's Auxiliary Air Force. You can see her in uniform there. And then she joined the Special Operations Executive and trained as a radio operator. So she became a spy. She landed in France in June 1943. And then for several weeks, she was the only radio operator for the British in Paris. So she was really quite a remarkable, and she was a very good radio operator. She was captured in October of that year, held in prison first in France and then taken to Germany. And she was executed in Dachau concentration camp in September 1944. And awarded the George Cross posthumously. The citation said, "She displayed the most conspicuous courage, both moral and physical, over a period of more than 12 months. There's now a memorial to her in Gordon Square in London and a blue plaque nearby." Shrabani Basu, who wrote a book about her, described her as dreamy, beautiful, and gentle. She was hard as steel as well. So moving to the east then, the 14th Army, General Slim's Forgotten Army, as they are sometimes known. The majority of that army were Indian. There were divisions also from the UK, from East Africa, or from West Africa. And of course, a lot of those men from Africa were also Muslims. And that army was turned the tide at the battles of Imphal and Kohima, 1944, then advanced steadily through Burma. And amongst their number was Naik Fazl-Din, who was born in 1921, Hoshiarpur in Punjab. He was in the 10th Baluch Regiment. And in March 1945, during the attack on Mektila, he was leading his section against a Japanese area, and a Japanese officer came at him with his sword and stabbed him through the body. And amazingly, Fazl-Din pulled that sword out of himself and killed that Japanese officer and then 2 others. He then returned to his command post where he collapsed of his wounds and died soon after. His body was never found, and he's remembered on the Rangoon Memorial. And the VC citation, which you can see there, refers to his supreme devotion to duty and his unquenchable spirit. Quite an extraordinary man. Unfortunately, there's no photograph of him that I've found. This photo shows a wonderful place in Scotland called Kingussie. And this is 2 years ago when we had a commemoration and a remembrance event in that cemetery. And in that cemetery, there are 9 graves for the men of Force K6 who died while they were in Scotland. And you will see the Imam himself there, who we're going to hear from shortly. And this was a very moving ceremony of remembrance for these 9 men. And also at that ceremony was Isabel Harling. And I'm just going to finish by telling you briefly about her. This wonderful lady who's in her 90s, has been looking after those 9 graves since 1947, for over 70 years. She said, "They came over from home and they gave their lives for us. It's only right that we should remember them." And for her selfless work and her determination and her persistence, she was awarded the British Empire Medal earlier this year. And I think she's I love that photo, the way it shows the companionship between a white British woman and a Muslim Scottish woman right there. And then I just wanted to show these 4 photographs, these are 4 veterans, World War II veterans that I met when I was in Pakistan 2 years ago. One of them is a woman, as you can see. And just really to say that there are still some of these veterans, these World War II veterans still around. We should remember them.
Dr. Gizab, what can I say? Every time I hear you speak, regardless of whether I may have heard some of that previously, it's such a powerful message. And as you very kindly wrote for a message on a picture plate for someone previously. History lives through the passion of people like you, you know, and I mean that. And I think unashamedly, Gaysab, have you got a copy of your book to hand at all? But perhaps you should hold that up and let everyone see. But you know, I would also like to plug Colourful Heritage, who I know are online and they've done a lot of work around this subject, and they've shared various links and whatever you. So please, please, to all the participants, feel free to look up those links. Dr. Saib, thank you for that very important reminder of the significant contribution by Muslim soldiers, alongside you know, the fact that we must of course also remember that they served as part of a global coalition of the Commonwealth, without which the fight against tyranny might have been a lot different. And so, you know, we're now getting to the part of the event tonight where we're going to start reflecting on remembrance. And although that's already obviously been part of the thread in the various conversations, but I'd like to get a perspective from the community. This event was initially planned as a physical event pre-COVID to have taken place at the British Muslim Heritage Centre in Manchester. Sadly, we've been unable to do that, but I'm delighted to hand over to Maqsood Ahmed, Chief Executive Officer of the British Muslim Heritage Centre, who has extensive experience of working in government and local authority, and is a champion for community cohesion, hence his role at the British Muslim Heritage Centre, where we hope to hold next year's event. Maqsood Saab, over to you.
Major Naveed and everybody, guest speakers, Assalamu alaikum, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Can I first of all start off by thanking you for inviting us to this very special event, the memories of our soldiers in the First War, Second World War, and the others who have given their life for us, and others for fairness and justice. So congratulations on keeping their memories alive, Major Naveed, and also General. And Minister, thank you for your wonderful sort of presentation as well. Let me start by saying that the reason why we wanted to take part and continue to take part and be with the Army as partners is one of our goals is to promote better understanding and better relationships through partnership. And through this goal of the British Muslim Heritage Centres, the trustees are very keen to make sure that the stories of the First World War and the Second World War are actually recognized by the community even today. And that's one of the reasons why we worked with the Army over the years. And we have an exhibition, a permanent exhibition now in the British Muslim Heritage Centre. So those visitors who come and visit us, thousands of them, sadly not now because of lockdown, but before the lockdown, we have thousands of people visiting the British Muslim Heritage Centre on a monthly basis and on a yearly basis to come and see this wonderful exhibition that's been there for quite a while. I'm fairly new as a CEO to the British Muslim Heritage Centre. I take no credit for all this excellent work that the trustees and the staff has done before I took over. But for me, it's been a personal journey over the last 12 months. I have learned so much about the British Army and the contribution of Muslims because I came from the mainstream NHS and Home Office, and I was not aware of the things that we've been listening to Guy and the others, and Mr. Guy and the others, and ministers, and what Major outlined. For me, it was something new. So I am a traveller of knowledge of the contribution of British Muslims. But it's been fascinating working at the British Muslim Heritage Centre. I've learned so much. So for example, 1.5 million Indians served in the First World War. Nearly 74,000 of them Indians died in the First World War, and 400,000 of them were Muslims. They came from all over the world, from Algiers, Morocco, Tunisia, to fight with the Allies, for the Allies. And so it's an absolutely fantastic contribution, really. And these are clips that I've taken off our exhibition. So if people who do come to visit the Heritage Centre when the lockdown's over, they will see these in the corridors and in the rooms and so forth. And it's a constant reminder to people of the contribution that the Muslims have made. So in one sense, it's an educational information that we have and we're proud to have within the center. And particularly in these challenging times where the right wing and extremism is increasing around the world. And I think for us to have something like this that promotes better understanding is absolutely fascinating. 60% of the British Empire recruits were from India, 60% Punjabis in the British Indian Army, as Mr. Gee pointed out before, and 20% of the British Empire recruits were from Muslims. And of course, in the First World War, we had 815 animals that were shipped from India in the First World War, which is absolutely fascinating from my side, Major. I mean, I never knew that at all. And 3.6 millions of tons of supplies shipped from India. So it wasn't just the personnel, it was the animals and the infrastructure that came with it that actually helped and supported us and the Allies, regards to that. But what I wanted to turn to is some of the stories that we have in our corridors that people see and read on a daily basis. And I think it's important to acknowledge some of the stories and some of the individuals, like the Victoria Cross winners of Shamshah Ahmad Khan, in a sense, with regards to a 36-year-old Khan made his most significant contribution to the British war effort, manning a machine gun section on the Tigris front. Khan continued to fight alone while all but 2 of his comrades were injured. He managed to hold his ground with rifle fire for 3 hours, and at the end came to rescue a wounded man, in a sense. So these are some of the stories that we have. Mir Das, for example, in 1915, Allied troops approached a ridge from which to attack the Germans, who tried to break the line by releasing deadly chlorine gas. The men had no gas masks as those days, of course, in a sense. They wet the ends of their turbans and dipped them into the tins of lime chlorine. It didn't work all that well. It wasn't really all that effective. However, Mir Das, though, was one of just a few soldiers who tried to hold his ground. Although slightly wounded, he rallied all the men he could find who were either lightly gassed or recovering, and with them he held onto the positions that reached until nightfall. As he did so, he helped to bring 8 wounded soldiers into safety before they died of their wounds. And in the process, he himself was wounded for the 2nd time. We also remember Khudad Khan. Khudad Khan was born in October 1888. He is famous as the first ever Indian recipient of the Victoria Cross, the highest military decoration. On 31st of October 1914 in Belgium, the British officers in charge of the detachment, having been wounded and the other guns out of point of action by shell, Sepoy Khudadad thought himself wounded, although he was wounded himself, remained working in his gun until the other 5 men of the gun detachment had been killed. Khan used a heavyweight Wicker Maxim. I'm not an army person, but I'm sure the general and the others will know that .303 machine gun are quite heavy. We had one of those in our exhibition, and when you look at that gun, God, I don't know how he held that, because it would take about 6 or 7 people basically to hold that machine gun, and he basically held that on his own. Last but not least, people like Raja Alfad Khan was born in November 1895. He was actually a school teacher, but he left teaching because of, in the district, one day when another teacher discredited the copy of the Quran, and Khan resigned. At the age of 19, he decided to join the army, participating in the war. Though he resigned from the army as a junior commissioned officer in 1940, Khan was recalled to the army a year and a half later in order to participate in the Second World War, in which he served as a 2nd lieutenant and won 3 distinguished medals. These were some of the stories that we highlight in our exhibition, which is open even yesterday and the day, and every year people come and visit. We also, in a sense, try to encourage the communities locally to every year to take on something that they can actually remember the British Muslim soldiers and the other soldiers well. For example, a few years ago, the fashion designer Tabina Kausar Ishaq, 25-year-old, created a headscarf that you can see the women there wearing in order to commemorate those who fell in the First World War. And this is now to really remind a number of Muslim soldiers who fought in the war, but also to sold them in the stores and so forth. We're trying to get that going again this year and the next year, just to get the headscarves. We're trying to get hold of them so we can sell them in the center ourselves and through the local shops. This is something that we need to really get that going again when that happens. But this is just a picture of before the lockdown, when we used to open up to people from local community from across the United Kingdom, particularly to the non-Muslims as well as the Muslims, whether they were working in the NHS or whether in the local authority or whether in the police service, to come and visit the exhibition and learn about the contribution of Muslims throughout in the First World War. You can see some of them there in the pictures, quite energetic, good discussions taking place with the army, ourselves, and some of the students as well as the community members. You see there, we have got a regular partnership with the army. In a sense, we do some awareness sessions with them, and they come and regularly visit us as well. It's a great pleasure every time the commanders and the majors come down, the lieutenants come down. We've got an excellent relationship with them, and they come and talk to the children. They come and talk to the community members whenever we need them. You see some of the children there. These are some Muslim children from local schools. And when they come to visit, it's amazing that the information that they receive through the teachers, and the teachers have a learning lesson for them as well. What we want to do with the exhibition, and we continue to do, is basically to make it live through the stories. So it's a constant discussion, debates taking place between the teachers, the students, and other professionals and members of the community, which we open out to. It's like an open day every day before the lockdown. They used to be open. There is some of the faith awareness seminars taking place with the army, in a sense, and I think it's a lovely quote that we got from Major Anthony Turner. The British Muslim Heritage Centre is a key and a trusted partner and greatly facilitated the delivery of the Culture Awareness Days held in Fulford Barracks for both military and civilian staff. The presentation given and the information provided through the informal discussions, workshops, gave the participant invaluable insight to Islamic faith and culture. And this is just one example that we want to do, basically, is to have a two-way partnership with the army. And I think our exhibition in partnership with them has been an excellent example how a partnership with a community center like ours can work, can be successful, and can increase the knowledge base to reduce the tension of the right wing on both sides, in a sense, and that's been working very well. We also use the Stories of Sacrifice exhibition in the corridors and so forth for our guest speakers and guest visitors. For example, we've had Prince Charles come in. He spent a lot of time observing and reading the Stories of Sacrifice when he came and visited us in April last year. We've had the ambassadors of Saudi Arabia, Indonesia. We've had ambassadors from all over the world who come in, and in particular, they spend some time reading and observing the First World War contribution by Muslims, in a sense. So it's been absolutely fascinating for us to use that. So what do we want to do in the future? And one of the areas in Major, and Naveed's already highlighted, we want, and the trustees are very keen to have and host an annual commemoration at the British Muslim Heritage Centre every year, where we involve faith groups, the Christians, the Jewish groups, and the Hindus and Sikh community members that use our centres as like any other, but involving staff from the public services as well. Because when I came from the public services, Major Naveed, I felt that our own staff in the NHS and in the police service and the local authorities are not aware of some of the contributions that the British Muslims have made. And I think the centre can play a very important part by not only working with the community, but also work with the professionals so they get some knowledge base with regards to the contribution of Muslims throughout the First World War, Second World War, and also to recognize that we do have a diverse sort of army where the Muslims, and proud to be British in the British Army and so forth, with the Hindus and the Sikh soldiers and the others. And I think this is a great opportunity and a great initiative for us. And we certainly use this as an initiative that to promote better understanding between the Army and ourselves and the community and the public services as well. So we widen it out into education, schools and colleges as well as other areas. I'm going to stop there. I think I've taken my 10 minutes as you allocated me. Since I've joined the Heritage Centre, is learning all the time about the Muslim contributions and the work they did in the Army and so forth. So it's been a great pleasure. And I thank you again on behalf of the trustees for inviting us to speak and share some of these things. And I hope to see you, some of you, once the lockdown is over, coming to the centre and visiting our exhibition and having a cup of coffee with me as well and the trustees. Thank you, Major Naveed.
Thank you so much for sharing the work that the British Muslim Heritage Centre has done. A lot of work around how much actually connects us, then separates us, then divides us. And the commitment also reflected on your words is quite powerful. You know, the relationship building just showcases the benefits of a connected society, regardless of one's background. I very much look forward to working with you going forward, especially looking to deliver this physical event next year. As I said, we were supposed to have been with you this year. Sadly, we couldn't, but let's start working soon to see how the next version of the National Muslim Service of Commemoration and the inaugural British Muslim Heritage Centre Service of Commemoration can join together to deliver a really good engagement for society. Our next speaker is Imam Asim Hafiz, who is the Islamic advisor to the Ministry of Defence. Imam Asim initially joined Defence as the first Muslim chaplain to be employed, a role which provides important spiritual as well as moral support for Muslim personnel. And there are a number of other civilian chaplains who have also been employed for the relevant faith groups, for example, Sikh, Muslim, Hindu, Jewish, and Buddhist. A little over 4 years ago, Imam Asim was appointed to his current role and has been involved in the National Muslim Service of Commemoration since the inaugural event in 2018. Imam Asim will now offer a reflection on tonight's event.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Peace be with you. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of Allah, the most compassionate and the most beneficent. Thank you very much to all the previous speakers who have given inspiring talks and left a hard, difficult model for me to follow. But over the next 5 to 7 minutes or so, I would like to offer some reflections on the evening. The pandemic was going to be the event that was going to bring people, communities, nations, and the world together. It was going to be that episode in the 21st century that was going to lay the foundation for peace, stability, and cooperation. For the first time, maybe in human history, we all had a common enemy that brought the world to a standstill. What a great opportunity for us to rediscover our common humanity. The same way 9/11 securitarized the world, the pandemic was going to be that bombshell that would reroute humanity from supposed self-destruction and accelerate us on a path of dialogue, respect, collaboration, and dare I say it, peace. Sadly, as you and I know, that has not happened. Competition, rivalry, opposition, contestation have only been exacerbated. Sadly, tragedies bring out the best in some of us, whilst the worst in others. What should have been an experience that would have given hope that peace and unity is possible is the future, and the solution to our global problems has only woken us up or just reinforced to us that conflict and rivalry are still alive and well. The challenge remains as to how peacekeeping and conflict prevention is pursued in an environment of such widespread aggression, hatred, and division. How do we make the case that the freedom we have and the values and principles that we take for granted did not drop in an abstract way from the sky, and were actually hard won and are sadly continually to be fought for. One of the ways we can do this is to remember those who sacrificed so much in the name of protecting those values, including those who paid the ultimate price and never made it back home, as well as those whose bodies, thousands of them, who were never found, whether that was 100 years ago, 50 years ago, or just 5 days ago. Because what happened in the past connects us with today, and it is today that will make our future. The same way we have heard that in the world wars, people of different faiths, cultures, ethnicities, nationalities, and genders came together to fight tyranny, oppression, and the curtailment of human rights. We should come together again today to champion that diversity and inclusion. The more diverse our armed forces are, the more effective they will be when doing their job, promoting stability, providing security, and laying the foundation for peace. In Islam, God did not intend for all of us to be the same and wanted us to leverage our differences for the greater good. He wanted his creation to be a reflection of himself, all-encompassing, all his beauty and magnificence shared amongst all humankind and not invested in just one people or person. To come together as one family and one people regardless of our outward differences is a betrayal of his intent and divine vision for the world. If we truly want to serve him, then we must together, by working in unison, create a world in his beautiful image. Just as the Quranic verses Corporal Job recited at the beginning, it is about maintaining that inclusive equilibrium God has set in motion, underpinned by justice and honesty, regardless of who you are. As the translation goes, the most compassionate taught the Quran, created humanity, and taught them speech. The sun and the moon travel with precision. The stars and the tree bow down in submission. As for the sky, he raised it high and set the balance of justice so that you do not defraud the scales. Weigh with justice and do not give short measure. He laid out the earth for all beings. In it are fruit, palm trees with date stalks, and grain with husks and aromatic plants. He is the Lord of the two easts and the two wests. Every being on earth is bound to perish. Only your Lord himself, full of majesty and honor, will remain forever. Then, which of your Lord's favors will you both deny? What is common between us is not our faiths, but is what makes our faiths, and it's our values and principles. The common values and principles that shape and lead us to fairness, justice, freedom, and peace in our society, country, and ultimately in the world. A world that sometimes can seem broken. But it's these types of small demonstrations of friendship, camaraderie, partnership, and respect that give us hope. The UK Armed Forces clearly has values that are compatible with Islamic values. And bringing together these two great elements of our society through remembrance makes a bold statement. That statement is that we are one community and that we are one nation. Britain wouldn't be what it is without its Muslim population, and nor would Britain be what it is without our armed forces. There is a clear Islamic statement which says, Hubbul Watan min al-Iman. Commitment to the place you call home is part of your faith. That love and loyalty includes the defense of your community and your nation. I cannot think of any better way to show that loyalty and love to your country than through championing the people. And I would like to emphasize the people who have served proudly protecting our nation with honor, courage, and commitment in our armed forces through this act of remembrance. The shared heritage that we have is important because it shows us that the British military has always had diversity in its ranks and that Muslims have a long tradition of serving in the British Armed Forces. Many times people in the community ask me, it's odd that Muslims serve in the British military. And I have to remind them, Muslims have served in defense of Britain and its interests for at least 100 years. This heritage is important because it's an excellent way of creating a narrative that connects and binds us to a common story. A story that reminds us that Britain's foundations are built on diversity, and therefore Britain is better and stronger, diverse and pluralistic, no matter how much people want to tell us it isn't. We are better together as a united force, for good in the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that thoughtful reflection. Some really, really important points for all of us to take away and digest. An important reminder to all of us about the need for moral and spiritual resilience at these difficult times. And as I now move on to our final speaker before the evening closes with a pre-recorded wreath-laying ceremony, which is supported by Mr. Zafar Iqbal of Working Borough Council, as well as the Royal British Legion. Remembrance is important to all of us in order that the sacrifices made in service of others are and is never forgotten. I'd like to now introduce you to Lieutenant Colonel retired Joe Falzon. Colonel Joe joined the Army in 1963 and retired in 2001 after 37 years service. He then joined the Royal British Legion, where he has held a number of roles before being selected as the current National Vice Chair of the Royal British Legion. Colonel Joe was due to be joined tonight by the National Chair of the Royal British Legion, Una Clemenson. Sadly, she cannot be with us. However, we look forward to hearing from Colonel Joe. Colonel, over to you.
Thank you. Salam alaikum. I am delighted to have been invited to be part of this year's National Muslim Service of Commemoration, and thank you, Major Nav, for your invitation. I feel, rather, I'm sure the General will understand, like a tail-end Charlie, because I have to sweep up now, and all that I had written in my script has already been mentioned. I came into this rather late, but I am very passionate about remembrance. I come from the island of Malta originally, which suffered hugely in the Second World War, and I have had comrades who have died in Belfast and in the Falklands who joined the army with me in 1963. So remembrance to me is can become quite emotional, but please bear with me. I am going to repeat almost everything which I have got here has been already mentioned by Baroness Goldie and Dr. Bowman, but I will need to do honor to three men of courage who fought for our freedom and whose memory and that of millions of others, the Royal British Legion, as custodian of our national remembrance, will never forget. We will always remember. I think it was the Baroness who said that, reminded us that 100 years ago this week, a couple of months after the end of the pandemic of that time, on the night of the 7th of November 1920, in strict secrecy, 4 unidentified British bodies were exhumed, one each from 4 different temporary battlefield cemeteries in Western Europe, on the Western Front. The 4 bodies were taken to a chapel in St. Paul-sur-Ternois, where they were draped with a Union flag, and Brigadier General Wyatt and Colonel Gell then selected one body at random. The other 3 were reburied. Over the next few days, the coffin of the unknown warrior was transported to London over land and sea by horse-drawn carriages, field ambulances, a Royal Navy destroyer, and a special train, with escorts along the route, gun salutes, dignity, and respect. On the morning of the 11th of November, the coffin was placed on a gun carriage drawn by 6 black horses of the Royal Horse Artillery, and finally taken from Victoria Station to Westminster Abbey, where it was laid to rest only a few feet from the entrance of the Abbey, in soil brought over from each of the major battlefields. The unknown warrior is British, but he represents all the fallen of the United Kingdom and today's Commonwealth, whose valor earned the right to be ceremonially put to rest among the kings. Moreover, he would have fought alongside comrades from across the modern-day Commonwealth, men of different faiths and colours with shared purpose. Together with royalty, politicians, diplomats and service chiefs, Over 100 war widows who had lost their husband and all their sons in the Great War were present at that momentous event in Westminster Abbey. Field Marshal de El Hague was an honorary pallbearer of the unknown warrior. And of course, he went on to become our founder and was the original national president of the British Legion. In addition, over 100 servicemen who had been awarded the Victoria Cross lined the route. We do not know for sure, but one of them could have been Kul Haddad Khan, a Punjabi Muslim, who, as already been mentioned, in December 1914 was the first soldier of the British Indian Army to be awarded the Victoria Cross. From the Second World War, I'm going to mention again Fazaldeen, born in East Punjab in 1921 and who volunteered to join the British Indian Army in 1940. On the 2nd of March 1945, aged 23, he was serving in Burma, commanding a section during a company attack on a Japanese bunkered position. Towards the end of the attack, the section was suddenly rushed by Japanese soldiers who came running out of a house brandishing their swords. In this close combat encounter, a Japanese officer ran Fazaldeen through the chest with his sword. As the officer withdrew the sword, Fazaldeen, incredibly, despite his terrible wounds, grabbed hold of it and killed the officer and then 2 other soldiers with him. And as we know, he was awarded the Victoria Cross posthumously for his act of gallantry in the face of the enemy. The Royal British Legion is committed to sharing these stories and many others like them. In doing so, we will ensure that the contribution of all who served is remembered and that the shared heritage of sacrifice across all of Britain's many different communities is both recognized and highlighted. Before I give the exhortation, I just would like to perhaps, your kind permission, just to make 2 commercials. In fact, one is a thank you for all the support you are given in your communities for our Poppy Appeal, which is a little bit different this year, but it is as important as in previous year, because now we had already seen a surge of demands for our assistance after the first lockdown, and we can expect the same to happen once this second lockdown hopefully comes to an end in early December. And the commercial is that right in the center of our country near Lichfield is our National Memorial Arboretum, which is a testament of all the sacrifices that has been made over the years by all the different armed forces and nationalities. I would recommend that when times are better, that you organize yourself a day visit. You will be very impressed with what you will see there. And of course, it carries our Armed Forces Memorial of all the names are recorded for those soldiers and servicemen, I should say, who died since after the Second World War. And next year is the centenary of the Royal British Legion. And hopefully we will get involved with you in as many ways as we can. And now that I have got this contact with Major Nav, and I know our president also has contact with you, Nav, then we have a connection there. So can I please just ask for your attention as I say, they shall grow not old as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them. Colonel Joe,
thank
you so much for your powerful words. And of course, the exhortation goes hand in hand with those immortal words inscribed on the stone in Kohima. when you go home, tell them of us and say, for your tomorrow we gave our today. And it just, those two, the Kahima epitaph and the exhortation, really do exemplify the powerful message of remembrance. And you know, I can't thank the Royal British Legion enough for the work you've done over the last 100 years next year, for having kept that message alive and increasingly involving communities from up and down the country to participate in remembrance. We now move on to what is an important component of remembrance, which is the laying of wreaths to commemorate courage, commitment, and sacrifice. I'll shortly let you watch a short video. It's about a minute long, before then coming back for just a few closing remarks from me before wishing you a good evening. So please bear with me whilst I play this video. Minister of State for Defence, General Officer Commanding Regional Command, distinguished speakers and guests. Welcome to this wreath-laying ceremony dedicated to the National Muslim Service of Commemoration 2020. I'm sorry that we cannot be together in person. However, today is dedicated to all those who have served previously and those who continue to serve.